Hi everybody, welcome back. Taylor here. Everything in your mental health and your personal development or anything that you work on to try to live a healthier, happier, or mentally more peaceful life boils down to your capacity for and your comfort with self-reflection. Now, self-reflection is a really big term, and oftentimes people think of it much larger than it actually is because it seems like a trendy buzz term and plays into a lot of mindfulness, spirituality, therapy, psychology, all the works. But the issue with that is that self-reflection is something that we are doing on a daily basis all the time. We're constantly reflecting. We're constantly seeing something, evaluating it, assessing it, reflecting, analyzing. It's just a matter of what we do with those analyses, what we do with those reflections. Our brain is just constantly filtering and organizing all those things into files in our mind to see if it's information that we need to use for anything else in our future. Because even though the capacity for what we're able to learn and what we're able to take in and what we're able to experience is potentially unlimited, at any given time, our brain is literally just trying to make sure we survive. So it's going to hold on to what we think is the most important information at that moment. And so the problem the trap that people get into is that if they're thinking that self-reflection is this big thing that their brain cannot handle, then they get scared of doing any kind of self-reflection, whether it's guided or it's unstructured or it's them by themselves. And the problem with that is because not only people are afraid of what they'll learn about themselves, in the therapy world, so many people are scared to do therapy or scared to ask for help because they might feel really isolated and alone in the work. And so if they dive inward, if they travel inward, especially if they're going to process some kind of trauma or experience extremely negative memories again, they're afraid of pulling all that up. They're afraid of the experience. They're afraid of what they might learn about themselves. And it's this sense of not feeling safe. It's this idea of like, oh gosh, I don't know how I can stay safe if I'm journeying so deep into my mind or my past or my memories. I don't know how to get out of that. So there's that fear. I've talked a lot about that in past videos, and I will for sure going forward. But the thing that's most critical today that I want to talk about is another fear, which is process fear. A lot of people put pressure on themselves because they think it's a big trendy buzz term that they have to do self-reflection right, that there's a right or wrong way to do it. And what I'm here to tell you today is that there is a process that you can go through, and that should come as much of a relief to anybody also because of the fact that there's just like a beginning and an end. You can start and you can stop anytime you want to. But the big issue, or the big thing that this is going to relieve for people, is that pressure, that perfectionist pressure that somehow we all get trapped in to make sure that you're doing self-reflection correctly in like one particular way, to make sure that you're doing it all perfectly. And that's just total bogus. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to go through this 5-step process of self-reflection. It is the 5 steps of the experience of self-reflecting. Just so that you know that if you are one of these people who are nervous about the process of self-reflecting, you're nervous about what you're going to learn about yourself in that process, the discomfort that you might feel learning about yourself and working through some painful or uncomfortable things, then this should provide an enormous amount of relief because it gives you structure to the experience. You'll be able to know, oh my gosh, I feel crappy right now, but I'm in stage 3, so that makes sense. And then you know that you have 4 and 5, and it's all temporary, and you can jump to 5 if you need to at any point. I'm going to give you a lot more volition in the process of whatever psych work you are trying to do. All right, so let's get started. I have my notes here. So, number 1, what I'm going to do, just to help illustrate these 5 steps for you, I'm going to talk about this like you were reading a fiction novel. I'm going to use a metaphor. You all know I love metaphors, but it also helps illustrate the experience of reading a novel is very much like the 5-step process of self-reflecting. So, step 1 is when you get that novel. And I don't know about you, I mean, I love fiction, but I'm so picky about the fiction novel. So for me, if I ever actually get the book, it means that I've like thought about it, I've read the back, I'm like, all right, I guess I'll try this out. So step one is when you have that curiosity. You've gotten the book and you're just like curious enough, you're intrigued enough that you'll just start reading the pages. In self-reflection, this is kind of like you'll open up a journal, you'll start writing a few notes. So you're like curious about the process, but you're not fully committed. You're not fully comfortable with it quite yet, and you might not know really where it's going to go or what you want out of it. So that first step is the curiosity phase where you're dipping your toe in, you're getting started, you're opening up the book, you're reading the first couple of chapters, but you're still kind of skeptical. Okay? Chapter 2, or not chapter 2, section 2, step 2 of self-reflection is when you start to read enough of the book to get to know the characters. You don't really know much about the plot, so really, like you start to get like random bits of information here and there, but you really just start to get to know the characters. And you're like, okay, I recognize this person in this process. I don't recognize all the other things happening. And in self-reflection, this is when you start to realize that whatever thoughts are coming to mind, whether you're journaling, whether you're meditating, whether you're talking with someone, doesn't matter. They're all about you. They might be really random. They might come out of nowhere and they might kind of surprise you and you might think about very random things. But you are the common denominator. You are the character in the story that everything kind of revolves around. And so just like when you're reading a novel, this is when you're like, okay, I know who the character is. All this random stuff is happening. There's no real like order to it yet. But all right, I'm connected. I'm connected to the character. I see what's going on. I see who's involved. And that's when you're really like recognizing your own role in the reflection. Because before in step 1, you're still like, I don't really want to do this. Kind of as though somebody else is dragging you into the reflection. But step 2 is where you're actually recognizing, all right, I'll take my seat. I'll hang out. I'll see what this is like. I'll feel this out a little bit. All right, then step 3 is when you're reading that book and you're probably like 100 pages in and you're starting to get really engaged with the story. Like a lot of information is starting to fall into place and you're like, oh, I kind of see where this is going. I see where the conflict is. I see what problem the characters are trying to solve. But you still have like 400 pages left in the book. And this is the part where when you're reading the book, you might think, oh my God, this is going to take a really long time. This might be a lot of work, or it feels like a lot of work to get through the rest of the book. And in self-reflection, this is that point where you're like, okay, I'm in it, things are flowing, I'm starting to see how things are like laid out a little bit, but you're realizing this might be daunting. You're realizing that you have so many pieces of information flooding into your brain space, and you're like, oh shoot, it might actually take a really long time to organize all this. So you're equal parts getting more connected with your reflection, and you're also getting a little nervous about the effort that's going to take, the amount of time it's going to take. And so that's going to lead into step 4, which is where you kind of get past that barrier. Like if you keep reading that novel up until page 200 or something, and you just kind of push through that 100 pages of like, man, this might take a while. You're just in the middle chunk of that book. If you can break through that barrier, just using that perseverance, your own little mental persistence to get through, no matter how you're reflecting, you get to this flow point. And this is like true connection point to the process. This is the part of the book where it's not necessarily the climax, but this is where everything's falling into place. You're starting to make connections. You're starting to see where the story's going. And in your self-reflection, this is when you're starting to really learn some things. You're starting to connect things like that emotion with that thought and that experience. And, oh, I'm like this. This is why I do this. You start to realize like things actually make sense. Things that felt so random are now connected. And that's what's so powerful about whatever process of reflection you want. For me, it's journaling. For a lot of people, it's meditation and prayer. It just lays the pieces out and then connects them for you so that you understand yourself, you understand your life in so much more of a concrete, succinct, and clear way. And that's what happens when you get to that point of the book where you're like, oh my gosh, we're leading to the climax. We're leading to the end. Like everything's happening. That's good stuff, bad stuff, challenges. happy parts. Everything's happening. And that's the same with your reflection. A lot of it's going to be happy and positive, but some of it's also going to be really challenging. And you're going to be in that flow place, so you're going to see the positive with the negative. You're going to be writing down the challenging stuff and the exciting stuff. You're going to be realizing the things that you have to accept, the things you have to take responsibility for, but also the things that you can go feel so much more relieved and excited and take action on. So this leads us to step 5. And this is critical. Step 5 of the self-reflection process is critical, especially if you're meditating or journaling, because step 4 is you're at a very deep meditative, reflective level. You're at this point where you're kind of transcended the mental, like the physical world, and you're seeing all things in a very different way than you normally do just in your day-to-day life, because you're not distracted by your day-to-day life. Now, that's where people get scared. That's where people are worried. If they're that deep in their own mind and in their reflection, how are they going to get back up? It's a legitimate question. It's a really great question, because sometimes people get kind of stuck, or they feel like they get trapped and stuck in meditations or hypnoses or trances or things like that. But that's why there's step 5. And step 5 is actually really critical for you to think about before you even start reflecting, because step 5 is when there's some closure. Step 5 is you literally being like, you know what? I only have 20 minutes to reflect. I only have 20 minutes to meditate. So you already know that there's going to be a container. Maybe you have to set an alarm, or maybe you need a friend to tell you that time's up. For me, I just know energetically when I'm kind of like running out of steam emotionally and energetically when I'm journaling. That's my cue of like, cool, I'm done. I like no more forcing it. But for you, for those people who are nervous about self-reflection and can't really trust their own instincts and energy, like I have after so much practice, after so many years of doing it, you might need to set that container for yourself. So it's chapter again. So step 5 is the process of closure. Now I say closure, and I don't mean conclusion, because you're not necessarily supposed to make any kind of big conclusions when you're self-reflecting. You can make connections and you learn things and you're like, oh, that makes sense. So it's kind of a conclusion. But don't make a conclusion as though that's like the only reflection you ever need to do and you're done. It's always an evolving process. So it's simply closure just for that period of reflection. Now, going back to our book metaphor, this is when you bring it all together. This is the climax and the resolution afterwards. Like, this is where all of the information you've gained, everything you've learned comes together. It all makes sense. Hopefully it's a happy ever after kind of story. It's a positive ending. But literally then the book closes. There has to be a closure of that story. And then you can always either pick that book up again or pick up its sequel or go pick up another one some other day. But there's a beginning and end to the process. You're not just stuck in that book or stuck in that story forever. So what that looks like with your reflection, like I said, you can either set a timer. You can start really small. Just try it for 5 minutes. Try it for 10 minutes. See how it feels. But like set an alarm. Have something, make sure that it gets you out of that. Or if you have a friend or you need a family member and you're just kind of nervous about how safe you're going to feel in the process, have them nearby. Tell them what kind of support you might need. Tell them that you're nervous. Tell them that you don't know how it's going to go or how you're going to feel. Or lastly, related to that, be aware that you might be feeling a lot of different feelings when that timer goes off. So you might want to give yourself a little bit of time before whatever it is that you need to do next. Even just like 5 or 10 minutes. Or like if you're driving in the car, that would be great. Like just drive and like kind of zone out. Because you're going to be feeling, it's like after getting a massage, like you've opened up a ton of like muscle chemicals and toxins and everything's flowing differently and the energy's different. And so you need to make sure to take some time and just like flush it all out. Just let yourself settle a little bit. And so after deep self-reflection and meditation, you might be feeling a lot of different things. You might be feeling a totally different energy, positive or negative, than you did prior to starting. So keep that in mind ahead of time. That's why I said start with step 5 and then go back to 1. Plan for the end. Plan for how you're going to feel safe and reintegrate into your daily schedule so that you don't need to feel the pressure or the fear or the angst that it's going to be a negative experience and you won't know how to protect yourself and you won't feel good afterwards. So try all of that out. Let me know if this was helpful for you. Should provide some structure and relief so that you're not only not worried about doing this correctly in some kind of way, but you also feel like you have some volition over this. You have some control over the experience of your own self-reflection and whatever kind of personal work and psych work you are doing in your life. So let me know how this goes. Feel free to comment below telling me what this system or sequence was like for you, or what system you use, what kind of reflection you use, as well as what kind of container you create for yourself when you do self-reflect. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care of yourselves, be kind to yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon.